Hello and welcome. I'm Jay,
And I'm Robbie.
And I'm Neil.
and you join us for episode 31 of Generations Apart, the show where we chat about gaming and technology across generations, sharing our perspectives on the past and our excitement for the future. On today's episode, we're excited to be joined by Neil Hughes, aka the tech blog writer. Neil's a tech columnist, published author, ghostwriter, and podcaster for hire. In 2015, he was named one of the top 9 influential tech leaders on LinkedIn by CIO magazine, and he also won LinkedIn Top Voice Award for being the number 2 technology writer of 2015 on the entire LinkedIn platform. We'll be finding out all about what led him to become the tech blog writer and getting his insights along the way in the tech and gaming landscape. So, welcome, Neil. Thank you for taking the time out to join us. As is tradition on Generations Apart, we like to start with a little segment we call Piqued Interests. I know you've prepared one for us, but I'm going to start us off by going to Robbie. Robbie, what's piqued your interest this week?
So, back into the theme of our podcast generally, we're going to be chatting about generative AI again. And it's just to look at how crazy Midjourney has gotten these days and how creative some people have gotten with it. And I've been following the Midjourney Reddit page, and there's just some incredible stuff that's been posted on there. And this one in particular piqued my interest, which is a video basically depicting the Avengers, but it's in 1920s style. And it's a combination of generating all these different images using Midjourney and then using another AI tool to manipulate those images to make it look like a video. And it's a really quite convincing trailer from the 1920s version of Avenged Sevenfold. Not Avenged Sevenfold, Avengers. And it looks really good. I know, yeah. There's a band on my brain at the moment.
No one would know the difference, would they?
But yeah, the Avengers in 1920s. I know this obviously isn't great for the listeners, but I would highly recommend those who are listening to the podcast just check out the Reddit page for Midjourney if you want to see some crazy generated images. But also I'll include the link to this video in the podcast show notes as well. But yeah, just Midjourney has come along so far since we initially talked about it earlier in the year, and this is just even more creative, adding it to videos and trailers.
It really has. I don't know, Neil, whether you've experienced much of Midjourney, but I've been playing around with Adobe Firefly for the last few weeks, months. And to be honest, it's not a patch on what Midjourney's doing. Now, I know that's because Midjourney, like some of the others, is trained on questionable source material in terms of its copyright and the legalities of the way that those models have been trained. But what Midjourney can do compared to Firefly is just worlds apart. I dipped back into Midjourney, paid for like a basic membership the other week just to start trying it out again, and I just could not believe how far it's come. Have you dabbled much with it?
Only a little, and I would completely agree with you. I think it feels like a lot of these bigger companies are almost jumping on the AI bandwagon, but they're almost a little bit behind. And a lot of these smaller companies that started this journey, they're the ones running away with it, and everyone else is just trying to say, "Hey, we're doing it too." Maybe I'm wrong, but that's how it feels from the outside looking in.
No, I completely agree, and I think the problem the bigger companies have got is they've got to be a little bit careful with the ethics. So, and how they're training their models, whereas these other ones, they can kind of retrospectively worry about that later, or they are worrying about it now. I know Stable Diffusion are dealing with a number of lawsuits, and I can't imagine that Midjourney aren't either. But yeah, it's fascinating how far it's come, and also they've simplified the process of prompting Midjourney. So I think it was version 5, I'm going to say. Don't hold me to that. Is it Midjourney 5 they're on now, where they basically taken away the Midjourney 4 preferred long form written prompts. Midjourney 5 now prefers keywords, and actually you get better results. It's just it's incredible.
There you go.
And
that was mine. So Jay, what's piqued your interest? We're going to go to you next.
Oh, you're coming my way first. Okay, well, I'll do mine and we'll say Neil's. I think Neil's is probably better than mine. So mine is probably less exciting, actually, in the grand scheme of things, but it did catch my eye. It's space related, so not Gen AI for a change or VR. Amazon is building a $120 million facility in Florida. I can't pronounce the project name. I'm going to call it Cooper, but it's probably not how you pronounce it. And basically, it's all about Amazon looking to compete with Mr. Musk and his Starlink space satellites. They're looking to basically put a number of satellites into orbit to start providing Amazon's alternative, or I guess it would be Blue Origin's alternative to Starlink's satellite internet. So they're looking to, I think Starlink have got something in the region of 3,200 of these high-speed internet satellites in low orbit, and I guess Blue Origins or Amazon are looking to get in and start to compete with them. So Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos getting into their space race, and I just thought this was an interesting development from Blue Origin, because I think really up until now Starlink have had the monopoly on low orbit, if you can indeed monopolize space. So yeah, I just thought I'd share that. I thought it was interesting. I wonder where it's going to go next. And if you've been reading into the space race, as well as kind of the internet piece, which is one of the things that they're looking at here, the other one is space mining and all the valuable minerals that are available. And I think, again, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos have both got one eye on that sort of profitability moving forward and being able to mine, I guess, things we're running out of on this planet and new minerals we don't have on this planet from space, which just sounds so ridiculously futuristic to me. My brain almost can't comprehend it, but fascinating all the same. So I don't know whether either of you got a view on the space race or internet being broadcast from satellites.
Oh, it's crazy, isn't it? Sorry, Neil.
Yeah.
Go.
No, I was going to say it is incredibly crazy. I do get a little bit frustrated with what we define as space sometimes, because we do have a lot of billionaires going up to space, but are they up into space or just about in the space then coming back down? I'd love to see us go a little bit further.
It's a good point. The low
That's
Earth orbit
true.
is
That is true.
usually where they end up, right?
Yeah.
So it's not far outside our atmosphere.
And do you know what's interesting? And the more that you think about the challenges that we have at the moment with space and getting into space, the more it makes me question the moon landing, and without wanting to become a conspiracy theorist, I find it harder and harder to believe that, was it the 60s when they did that?
Yeah. And we've lost the technology now, apparently. If you start reading about it online, you go down all kinds of rabbit holes with Stanley Kubrick, etc. So I implore you not to go down that hole.
Well, isn't there a plan in the
next episode? I'll be here with kitchen foil on my head and all sorts of stuff.
They're planning another visit to the moon, aren't they? Soon. I can't remember which nation it is. Might be the US, or it might even be China or something like that. But I think they're hoping to set up a base there. To figure out how how to live there.
Yeah, 60 years later, feels like they should have done, shouldn't it? Really. I just find it harder and harder to believe the more that I think about it, and the more that I grow up and understand the various challenges involved with doing it. And I think, did they? I'd still like to believe it's all true, but I can't help but have a little bit of doubt now and go, well, it does seem kind of implausible with 60s technology. But
especially if you've seen that technology. If you've been to like Florida and the Space Center, and it just looks like a bit of tinfoil and something was made on Blue Peter almost,
Exactly. Yeah. Like, how did that survive? And not only did it get you up there, it got you back. Like, unbelievable.
That's the incredible thing, I think, is that getting off the moon to come back here is wild.
In fact, slightly aside, but on that topic of space, I saw Neil Armstrong. I think it was a picture of him on Twitter, because he's very old now. There's probably very few people left in this world that genuinely know one way or the other definitively whether they did that or not. And if once he's dead, you've got to wonder, will we ever find out? He's still going, is he? Oh, well, in that case, there's a couple of people left who still know. But like, that number's got to be dwindling, hasn't it? As we, 60 years on, you've got to think most of the people that were involved in that activity are probably either very close to the end of their life or have been and gone. Will we ever find out? But anyway,
I think Buzz Aldrin went through a stage of hitting people if they asked him the question. I don't know if you've seen that. So if you see Buzz, don't ask Buzz.
Yeah, don't ask him. He's 93 now. I just googled it.
Well, there you go. So I'm kind of hoping. And again, would you believe them if they did it? They get to old age, they get there on their deathbed, and they're like, "It was all faked." And they just go. And then, because even if it wasn't true, I feel like that would be the way to go. Just throw the cat amongst the pigeons, make that the last thing you say, and then conk out.
The final mic.
No one will ever know. Yeah, exactly. Anyway, sorry, that was me massively deviating from the topic there. But let's throw it back to you, Neil. What did you bring along? And I'm excited for this one, having seen your
Oh
notes.
man, well, it's difficult to follow your two cool examples there. But I recently spoke with Chris Ebling on my podcast from a company called Behavioral AI, and he blew me away because one of the things that I get really excited about is not just the big tech buzzwords, but how they all converge and how they might all complement each other. And he's been redefining sports entertainment by combining all those big tech buzzwords that we're familiar with now: Web3, artificial intelligence, NFTs, etc. And you may remember, I think his journey began with Zrun, which allowed users to own their own digital champion racehorses, where you could build your own stable of champions, use your skills to dominate on the racetrack. And I think at the time it hit the headlines because horses were traded for over $125,000 and whole stables were exchanging hands for 250,000. Absolutely crazy. But he's now moved on to cricket, and they're tackling, I think the game's called Meta 11, and it's described as the next generation of fantasy cricket gaming with AI digital athletes. And essentially, it allows you to acquire and develop artificial intelligence sports styles to compete in virtual tournaments, which captured my imagination straight away, where you can support your favorite players from the real game and the teams online as you would as watching that real life sport. But they describe it as the Fortnite of sport and a kind of Marvel universe, but for digital athletes. So that piqued my interest around the future of sport, technology, how those worlds can collide. And also, I know me and you are, James, are big football fans, but it takes that PES Master League and Football Manager that we grew up with to a whole new level. So it just got me thinking about where all this could lead us to.
As you were saying it, I mean, first of all, my first thought was, why would you do it with cricket
Yeah,
of all the sports? But whatever, take that out the equation. I thought, if you applied what you just described to football, I could see where that
Huge.
would get people excited. Yeah, like the idea of exchanging building these footballers up, exchanging these superstars between clubs. These kind of. I suppose you could even get into, is it a DAO? You could even have you could have one of those that runs one of these digital football clubs, so everyone's contributing to and making decisions on who gets bought and sold. I did watch the two videos that you shared. I'd never heard of Zrun, so to hear that's already been something that's been in the mix now for however long, I assume what you were sharing there was entirely new. So that's completely evaded me. I'm slightly embarrassed to say that that's evaded me, given the area that it covers. But Meta 11, again, completely. As I watched the video, I thought the animation style, the characters looked very Fortnite-like. But to hear you describe it and bring it to life, I think it's a really interesting concept. I did wonder watching it, because it doesn't tell you anything in the video that you shared, about what you've just described. I thought, why has he sent me a picture of Fortnite cricket? Because that's what it looked like.
The animation style's super
yeah, that's
similar, isn't it?
fascinating. Yeah, it's fascinating. That is, and I've never heard of this guy or this
And
company.
again, I would say
Completely new.
don't feel bad about not knowing about it. Until I spoke to him, I must admit I had not heard about it too, and it just sent all the cogs going on. Hey, this is what we could do with sport and how we can bring it to the next level, etc. And I think maybe it's a scale issue. Maybe that's why they started with cricket, try and master a sport like cricket with a smaller audience, and then look to scale into some of the bigger sports. I'm not sure, but yeah, it just certainly got me thinking about things.
Yeah, it would
And
make
what's
sense though.
interesting, I suppose, is you don't need to worry about the licensing challenges that plague these sports games either, because I guess the whole point is that you're not creating a Ronaldo or a Messi or even a likeness. You're creating brand new athletes. So
Yeah.
that licensing issue presumably isn't there either. And even the league structures, anything, you don't need any of that. You're creating it all from scratch, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
Mm, I like it. I really like that. What about you, Robbie?
Yeah, it's cool. I think it would be cool when I see it in other sports. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not the biggest cricket fan, but I can see definitely the potential for other sports. I'm partial to MotoGP, so the motorbike racing. I think there'd be a cool version of that. Maybe you collect I don't know, different like bikes and things like that, and vote for riders, and I don't know, give them power boosts. I'd seen a concept a while ago about kind of a Hunger Games style of Formula E suggested, where you would potentially give people power ups and stuff as they're going around the track. I don't know if that's actually a thing already, in Formula E. Anyone who's watched that might already know. But I think you can do like audience voting for like your favorite rider, and if they get enough votes, they might get some kind of extra bonus boost in their car or something like that. But yeah, that
All that's
interactivity.
got me thinking of is what's the movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger in when he's in a TV show and they're all about trying to kill each other.
I know the one you mean. I just
Why
can't
can I
remember the name.
not?
No.
It's an 80s. He wears a big yellow jumpsuit. What is it called?
Oh, The Running Man.
Running
Running
Man. I
Man.
think
Yes,
that's the one. Yeah,
that's the
he looks
one.
like a
Yeah.
That's
gladiator.
all I can think of. Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, one of the things I noticed in the video as well was that it wasn't just the players, but also the spectating element.
Mm.
So I noticed that one of the things that they point out is that they want to create these digital crowds as well that are watching and spectating these sports. So it's not like Football Manager where you would pick the players, click simulate, and then watch the text or watch the 3D characters at pace, play the game out to quickly get through to the next. It sounds like they want to make this genuinely exciting and, a full spectator sport. That's got to present its challenges because best will in the world, FIFA, which is probably one of the best sports simulators going, it's not that exciting to watch if you're not playing, unless you know the people who are involved that are playing. So I don't know. It'd be interesting to see how that plays out. But yeah,
And
interesting all the same.
what about breeding digital horses? Does that interest you at all?
I mean, I personally am not into the kind of horse racing or the dog racing, or I'm not really into that scene. I'm just not a
Yeah.
big gambler. But again, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I suppose I wouldn't be interested in betting on it, but I quite like the idea of developing a character, if you like, and then building their skills and competing with them. It's a young man's game, I think. I can't imagine I'd ever have the time to properly invest in it. But
I think the added challenge
it
for that
sounds
as well
interesting.
is, especially because they're kind of all AI and digital, that the trust in whether it's fixed at all, I think would be pretty low. As you're watching your digital horses, that could potentially, it could have been predetermined which one was going to win by just programming it.
That would be interesting, especially if you were going to encourage gambling, because then you'd have to have a level of transparency, wouldn't you?
Yeah, yeah.
But then this stuff happens now. I mean, aren't there? There are online casinos. All of that is driven by code. Ultimately, there's
I
no
don't trust them neither.
spinning. No, well, exactly. That's my point, though, isn't it? So how do they get around that now? Because I guess there's not that much difference, other than the fact that in those environments you don't get a say in how the horse is digitally trained. That's such a thing, or what their stats are. That you're just looking at them on a screen, aren't you, and picking one and watching it play out. I don't know.
Yeah.
I really like the idea of it though, and I like what you said, Neil, about the kind of convergence of different technologies and industries creating something entirely new. And I think that's my kind of fascination with the metaverse. Robbie and I have talked about it quite a bit on the podcast over the course of the year. There's lots of different ways that this metaverse is emerging and becoming exciting, and it's not through the traditional route, so it's not through the big corporates that you might expect. It's coming in other places, and I think it's really interesting. So yeah, fascinating. Anyway, should we move on and talk all about you, Neil?
Oh man.
So I guess, Neil, thank you for coming on, and for you. We haven't gone through what we're going to talk about yet, but it's a deep dive on you really, and how you found yourself doing what you do. I think it'll be interesting to lots of different people that are either interested in following a similar path, just curious about some of the different things you've done, because you've done quite a variety. And for me, as a techie and a gaming geek and someone who shared those daydreams with you back in the day, I'm just fascinated to hear how this story unravelled for you, because there's gaps even in my knowledge. And for transparency, I've known Neil for 16 years now, which was a scary number when I worked that out. And I've had the pleasure from a distance at times of watching you on this journey, and I'm fascinated to sort of share that with others. Before we get into though your past, just a couple of kind of high level getting to know you questions. Neil, what's your first memories of tech and or gaming? I'll let you choose. Something that perhaps you owned, maybe a family device. What got you into it all those years ago?
Oh man, I'm going to date myself now and reveal just how old I am. But I guess One of the things that I love about technology is I feel like I've been there, especially in the gaming world, from the very beginning. And I think my relationship began when my granddad brought home I think it was Pong, it was called, which is just like the bat and ball game there. And it was, I think it was black and white. It had two paddles. It was so basic. And from there, it kind of, I remember spending hours just playing with my granddad. So you got that bonding with him. That was fantastic. And then from there, I quickly remember there was a little portable arcade game, which back then, that kind of thing was just unthinkable. And it was called Astro Wars. And I just spent hours on that. And then from there, the Atari 2600, that sexy wooden veneer finish, man. There was
Yeah.
just nothing like it. Those big clunky cartridges, the games weren't great, but there was something special about that. And then if I look even further from that, I think this was about 1983, 1984. You might have to look this up, but I don't know if either of you have heard of it. The Tommytronic 3D device. Have either of you heard of that?
Omnitronic, no.
I have not heard of the Tommytronic.
Oh, man. Well, imagine going back
No.
40 years ago, right? 40 years ago, and you've got a glorified Space Invaders game that you hold up to your eyes and you're playing the game with it, like playing it through some binoculars almost, or a primitive VR set. So that was like an early concept for VR way back in 1983, and it just blew my mind. I'm sure it was a very primitive way of how it worked with a few lights and mirrors, etc. But that was possibly the moment that really I was like, wow, maybe VR could be a thing. And that was like 40 years ago, just insane.
It sounds very similar to the Nintendo Virtual Boy, because that, again, I think that was an 80s device after what you've described, which again was this kind of headset that you would put up to your eyes and it would kind of fake this 3D. Although weirdly, I think everything in the Virtual Boy was a shade of red, which presumably is some sort of restriction of the technology at the time. And you say all the way back into 83. I think wasn't 83 or 85 the launch of the NES. I think it goes that far back. So yeah, I mean that Pong, I can completely sympathise there. My granddad also owned a Pong game, and I remember playing that on his TV. I think we were at the point where we were already on our NES, if not the Super NES by then, so it wasn't quite as magical. Although I do remember putting quite a lot of time into it and being fascinated by it was like a little twist, like a twisting knob, almost like a volume knob, wasn't it, on a controller from memory? It wasn't a joystick, so you moved your paddle up and down. At least on my granddad's, by turning this knob kind of clockwise and anti-clockwise to get that paddle to move up and down. Yeah, love that. Love those memories. It's great.
And I think I should also mention text adventure games. Because as good as
Nice.
text and graphics were, man, there was a time when I was happy with essentially a DOS screen, open gate, prize lock, enter tavern, order beer, all those kind of stock phrases from those text adventure games. And I don't know, it almost transported you to another world with your imagination just using a DOS screen. And completely crazy looking back, but so many hours enjoyed on that too.
Interesting. So you were early on the PC gaming as well then?
Yeah, well, I think it was a BBC B was my first, because my mum and dad said it's great for education, and all my mates had a Commodore 64, and I was gutted. But later on, I ended up getting a Commodore 64 as well. But yeah, so fantastic times.
Nice.
I do remember my dad, I think, owned a Windows 3.1 PC before I had my own PC, and that was the glory of Windows 95.
Yeah.
And he had there was like a primitive version of Paint on there. Might even have been called Paint. And I remember spending ages creating what I would probably consider to be pixel art now, but just kind of colouring in the little blocks, because that's all that this software could handle, was a very kind of low resolution image. And I would spend hours making these like cityscapes with Marvel characters, X-Men and stuff in battle. Really primitive, like almost as bad as Stickmen. And there was a game on that was also in DOS, and I cannot remember what it was called, but it was essentially, you might remember it, two gorillas, one either side of a screen with a randomly generated cityscape again between them, and you had to key in the trajectory and the power to throw your banana at the other gorilla. And you had to basically, it was like a trial and error. So you'd punch in a number combination, the banana would go across the screen, and you'd thrown it too high. So then the next throw, you'd bring it down a little bit, and then you'd go too low, and then you'd dial it up a little bit. And it was a competition basically to see who could get their banana to strike the other one first by making these small incremental changes with each throw. I can't tell you how many hours I spent playing that game, and on reflection, it was so basic. But again, that was all done in DOS, and I cannot
Yeah.
remember what the name of that game was. But yeah, loved it. Loved it. I don't think games need to be complicated to be fun.
Mm.
I think there is an argument that says some of the modern games are overcomplicated for that kind of pick up and play, more casual audience. But yeah, great stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we are living in a time of AAA, big budget games, but equally there's a thriving indie game scene. So there's
Very
still
true.
a lot of room for it.
Yeah, oh, 100%, 100%. So Neil, let's jump forward to the modern day. You've brought us there conveniently anyway with your last comment there. What are you carrying around these days? What's your tech like? What powers the tech blog writer?
Oh man, well, I go to that many tech conferences where I often get thrown into a meeting room with half a dozen people sat there taking notes while I interview their CEO, and usually they say something like, "Hey, Steve's got a hard stop in 20 minutes." So for these reasons, I just need my tech to work. So if I look at my tech kit bag when I'm going to a conference or summit, typically I've got a MacBook Pro, a Focus Scarlett, I think it's a 2i2, that I can
Nice.
plug my two short MV7 microphones. I don't want to geek out too much, but Robbie, I think you appreciate this stuff.
Yeah.
And as backup, I've also got a short MV88, which has got a lightning connector that I can plug into my phone. So if the interface or anything fails, and I've got some kind of recording from my phone and that short plug in there. And on top of that, there are tools like Descript, ChatGPT, Audacity, the Adobe suite to help me turn an interview around quite quickly so I can go in a room, get that recording, 20 minutes, edit it super quick and get it out. Because when I'm at a tech conference, it's no good posting it in a few days or the following week. It needs to be turned around quite quickly. And very often I need approval from the guests as well. So essentially, my excuse for being an Apple fanboy is I just want my stuff to work.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough.
Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. Robbie, in fact, I think the Focusrite is the same device you turned me on to. I think mine's the
Yes.
2i2, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah. So when I visited Jay down in Birmingham, I brought my Focusrite. I've got Scarlett 4i4, mostly because I use it for music recording. I thought I'd bring it down because it's good for podcast recording as well, especially if there's multiple people in person. And yeah, following that trip, Jay ended up getting them on himself.
Yeah, good job as well, because my tech failed miserably. So it was a good job you brought it. And I love the fact that Neil, I guess you have to think about the backups as well. The fact that you've got to take a third mic and your phone just in case your first lot of tech fails, because I guess you only get that one chance, don't you?
Oh man, well I've got a story behind one that failed once. I secured an interview with Gary Vaynerchuk in Vegas once.
Wow.
And I was recording it. Robbie, you're going to hate me saying this, so I apologize. These were very primitive times. But I was using a Blue Yeti and Audacity, and I got the recording. Everything's good, and he was talking to me about I'm half dismantling my stuff, and as I unplugged the USB from my MacBook, the Audacity corrupted the file, and I'd lost absolutely everything.
Oh.
And it was one of those moments like, I don't know, if you've got an Excel spreadsheet and you lose your work, it only happens to you once. And you're like, that is never happening to me again. But fortunately, the guy who works with D-Rock, he was recording as well through a camera. I managed to use his audio and it was saved. But yeah, from that day onwards, I thought I'm staying away from USB. I'm having a Focusrite, two XLR cables, two separate mics, and a backup, and all because of what happened that day.
Wow. What a person to interview as well. Literally, really spooky. I was literally just listening to a podcast with him on today.
No.
Yeah. He's just been interviewed by Stephen Bartlett. If you've seen The Diary of the CEO.
Yes. Yeah. I've heard that one. Yeah, good interview.
There you go. We got Robbie. If you found that interesting, we got loads to unpack. I think with Neil's career and where it's taken him. But we'll get to that. Last getting to know you question then, Neil. You talked about games you used to play and the things you enjoyed, in your early formative years. What are you playing now, and what are you playing it on?
Oh man, well, ironically, writing about tech and recording a daily podcast means I don't have that much time to play games anymore. But saying that, I do have an Xbox One, a PS5, and a Meta Quest 1. So I dabble with the thrill of the fight on the Meta Quest. Man, that's given me a whole new respect for the world of boxing. I've played 3 or 4 rounds and not been able to lift my arms up. I've watched boxing and I see fights. Say, "Why don't you get your hands up? Get your hands up, man!" But I've been in that situation playing a virtual game and I cannot physically lift my hands. But I guess my days of spending £70 on a brand new release game are gone. So I rely on PlayStation Plus, Xbox Gamer Pass. That pretty much gives me enough to keep me quiet. And the ones I'm playing recently, Death Stranding, Days
Ooh.
Gone, Life is Strange, which I kind of missed first time around. So I've been revisiting that, Wolfenstein New Order, and I'm looking forward to going back into Alan Wake Remastered as well.
Nice. That's
Very
quite an
good.
array there. And I must admit, I imagine that boxing's even harder when you're being punched in the face. So, something
True.
your quest spares you of. So, add that into the mix as well, I suppose, and it gets even more difficult. And it's interesting you mentioned Game Pass and PS Now. I would agree with you. £70 feels like a hard
Mm,
pill to swallow now when you've got Game Pass and day and date release for some of their new titles, and so much out there as a busy working dad now.
mm.
Again, time is tight. Can't find a window to sit and game like I used to in my 20s or my early 30s. So yeah, I must admit, very few games push me to the £70 purchase point.
Mm.
In fact, I've ironically spent more over the last few years buying old games and building out like a collection of my little museum of retro stuff because I just get more enjoyment out of that, and I'm quite content now to wait until those other games drop onto subscription service in some way or come down in price and I pick up a cheeky deal at CEX or something like that. So
Mm.
yeah, it is difficult, but you've got all the gadgets though, so you've got the same problem, Neil. You've got all the money and
Yeah,
no
no
time, whereas when
time.
you were a kid you had
Time.
no all the time and no money. Yeah.
Yeah, and I must admit, sometimes I do love just switching my brain off, having a game of FIFA Ultimate Team or Call of Duty, and just veg out for an afternoon. But the FIFA thing, I mean, you guys will be able to help me out here. What's going on with the EA Sports no longer doing FIFA? That's going free to play, and what's happening there? Because obviously we're coming up to the new football game soon.
I
Oh, that's a
don't
world
think
I
it's
haven't
going
delved
free to
into.
play. Yeah,
Yeah.
Robbie doesn't do football. I mean, I don't. I'll give you what I think I understand. So you're right. FIFA, as we know it, is done. Um, EA basically decided not to renew. I think FIFA were asking for absurd amounts of money, and EA went, "Well, we probably don't need it, to be honest. Just for the name, we've still got all the licensing for the players." So EA Sports Football Club, as it's now called, or EA FC 24, is your new FIFA. And as
Right.
far as I'm aware, it's still going to be 70 quid. There was talk of it going free to play, and
Yeah.
then they were going to kind of get you hooked in with all the Ultimate Team stuff. So I kind of know. Part of me, when that was first announced, thought, I hope they don't do that. But I'll be honest, I haven't bought a FIFA for the last couple of years.
Mm.
I've been just picking it up free when it drops half through the season on Game Pass and having a little game. I don't have the time or the interest to play it like I used to. I mean, Robbie, for your benefit, Neil and I were hardcore FIFA back in probably 2011, when I still think FIFA was kind of at its best for me anyway, and we played hours and hours, and we had a FIFA Ultimate Teams, pro clubs, we had a whole IT department of colleagues who all played it. It was fascinating, but yeah, I think EAFC 24 is what you're looking for now, Neil. That is basically FIFA as you know it today. I don't think it looks radically different from the clips. I don't imagine it will be because it's just going to be an evolution from the same game engine. But there you go.
So are
Just
FIFA
And
doing an alternate version, or?
it's rumored. I don't think
Yeah.
they've announced anything yet, but it is rumored. I mean, who they'll be partnering with? Because I'll be perfectly honest, I don't really know where PES is at these days because it got rebranded, didn't it? To
Yeah, it went free to play last
was
year, I
it
think.
something like again that was something football? Yeah, it went free to play. Had a disastrous launch. I don't know where Konami's at. Whether Konami might think actually maybe we should get back into bed with FIFA and this will help us, or whether they'll go for an entirely new studio, or whether they'll just do something completely different with the licensing. Maybe they'll go down a mobile route or something else. I
mm,
don't know. But I mean, really, FIFA's the only one left, isn't there? I think PES shot itself in the foot when it rebranded and became free to play because I don't think anyone's playing it. But could be wrong.
Well, before we upset
Um,
any hardcore PES fans out there, we've got to say the ball dynamics, the physics are better on PES. They are. I've stopped myself from being flamed. Okay.
do you know
I,
what? PES gameplay always was superior until they broke the game in 2011.
Mm,
Where no, 2008. It was the Michael Owen cover. I don't know if you remember this,
yeah.
Neil. I remember specifically back in our days working together that we used to have a thriving online gaming community, and we used to self-manage our league. Do you remember that
Yeah,
that
yeah.
web page we used to keep, and we used to manage all the games, and you'd update the scores, and everyone would go off and play on their 360 or whatever. And then they brought, I think it was PES 2006 went on to PES 2008, or PES 6 became 2008, and there was something fundamentally wrong with the online code, which they apparently couldn't patch or weren't interested in patching. So the online just didn't work. It
Mm,
fundamentally didn't work. And that a load of people, including myself, moved to FIFA that year, and I never went back.
mm.
So yeah, there you go.
Sorry,
There's an old
Robbie,
story
we
for you.
dominated
No, I
the
mean that's
conversation
some
with football there.
next level nerdiness as well. Managing your own clubs, center websites.
We had
Love to
match
hear it.
reports. We had match reports and everything.
Wow,
We did.
wow,
We
cool.
did. That's not how we probably would be described by people at the time, but yeah, we thought it was cool. So, actually, we touched on, Neil. We're going to get into a bit of a deep dive. I feel like diving deep already. We're getting loads of great stuff here. But I wanted to go back to that time when we were working together. So, sort of 16 years ago now, 2007, when you were at the time, I think you were doing your games journalism, and you were writing articles, dipping your toe into that content creator space and blogging. And I believe, if memory serves me correctly, it was This Is My Joystick was the platform back in the day. Have I got that
Yeah,
right?
yeah, you have,
I
man,
was
and that takes me back to Pro Evo again, Pez, because I was on the Pro Evo network, which was just sorry to geek out again, Robbie, but it was another. It was just every football fan's dream.
Yeah,
That people recorded the entire match. They would create edited highlights. There'd be a full tiered league system, all the leagues, including European leagues as well, and there was promotion and all that kind of stuff. And on the forums, I run a section called Neil's Deals, where I would
nice.
go on places like Hot UK Deals and various other forums. I'd get those on offer prices for games. I'd post them as Neil's Deals. And from there was a guy called Andy Corrigan and Simon Weatherall said, we're going to create our own gaming website called This Is My Joystick. We're going to do reviews, editorials, but we'd love you to have a column on Neil's Deals where I post the week or the month's best deals. And from there, I then started writing editorials. I used to do a PES versus FIFA every year. Then it went into opinionated articles. And I think back then, my writing was pretty shocking. I'll be completely honest with you. So anyone wanting to go into tech writing, thinking they're not a writer and convince themselves they're not good enough, just don't listen to that imposter syndrome, because the editor Andy, he was writing for IGN at the time, and he was
Mm,
quite brutal with his feedback and coaching me, telling me where I was going wrong, where I needed to improve, etc. And it was that feedback that just inspired me to get better and better and better. And that combined with the work ethic of Ray Wilmot, another guy in the game industry, he was churning out content I could only dream of knocking out that fast. And I think from there I ended up arranging press passes for big events. So to try and get This Is My Joystick, we got them to Eurogamer, the BAFTA Gaming Awards. I had somebody on the red carpet interviewing celebrities, and even E3. And I didn't know it at the time, but This Is My Joystick would ultimately put me on this path that I'm on now. And none of it was a plan. It kind of happened by accident and playing too much PES.
incredible.
But isn't that it's fascinating, isn't it? That's the beauty of some of these things you do in your career. You don't necessarily know where it's going to lead, but you can
Mm.
kind of look back and realize how these different things kind of came together for you. And I remember those This Is My Joystick days. I remember players on the website reading articles. I'm interested now. Do you know what's happened to those guys? What are they doing now? Are they? I assume you're still in touch with them.
A couple of them I am. I know Ray Wilmot. He's working in the game industry for one of the games companies. I can't remember which one. It might be an indie gamer. But Andy Corrigan, he was owning the site. He just said we're not going to do it anymore. He kind of put it on hold, and he went full on. He was in IGN and a couple of the other gaming magazines as well. And he's freelancing. He was living up north. He's now met a girl and settled down in Australia being a games journalist. So he was on a very similar journey, and his life completely transformed as well from setting that website up.
That's fascinating. It's just amazing, isn't it, to think there's something that spawned from a hobby. And
Yeah.
as you said, Neil's Deals, that took me right back. I remember getting my regular feed of Neil's Deals, and I remember Hot Deals UK being somewhere that we used to browse all the time.
Yeah.
But I also remember buying from, almost everything I bought from Play.com, if you remember those.
Yes.
Blast
Yeah.
from the
Play.com, wow.
past. Yeah, going back a long way.
Yeah.
The other memory that kind of occurred to me, Neil, when I was preparing for this was I remember we used to discuss our commutes, and as someone who'd only ever worked sort of 15 minutes from where I lived, and always driven, I never really understood why people would want to get the train to work. Now, I've grown up, I've understood these things now, but back then I was naive, early 20s, and I remember thinking you were just, used to love your commute, and I'd be like, Neil, why didn't you drive? You're like, no, I like the train. I'm like, why would you want to do that when you could drive? And then I remembered Instagram at its kind of infancy, and I remembered you used to take, whether this was, you should have been doing or not, I don't know, but candid images of commuters on the train, and then you'd stylize them in black and white and then post them. And for a long time, and remind me, Neil, I think you had a name for that particular account, but I remember thinking, you were doing these things, and you'd always show me these sort of new social platforms, and I felt like you were kind of the frontier of social networking, to me at least, because you would always highlight new platforms to me. You were always on them whenever I set one up, and I just, like I said, that the memories of the Instagram feed specifically, and your candid commute pictures. But what was that all about? And do you remember much of those early social media days?
Yes, I'm going to unmask myself now. I was the stealth iPhoneographer, I think my name. That was my name. And I was fascinated by street photography, and I always try and look for the beauty in the mundane. And that commute was, I think it was 2 hours round trip a day for 11 years. And I used to just look around at people, wondering what their story was, and try and bring it to life through the lens of an iPhone. At least that was the idea back then. And I think it was on Instagram, as you said, and also Tumblr. Do you remember that? I had a little account on
Wow.
there too.
Do vaguely remember Tumblr, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. I just remember that being, yeah, but like I said, it just felt like you were onto something that other people weren't doing, and it was one of those things that felt a little bit odd, and I was like, why would you do that? I don't really understand. And then inevitably everyone was doing it, and I think you just always had an eye for kind of what was going to be cool, or what was the next big thing. At least that's how it always felt to me. So I just thought I'd mention that while we were on it. And as I said, we used to daydream a lot at our former place of employment, and we would talk about that journey to becoming independent and not,
Mm.
working for ourselves. I was dabbling with my own firms. You were working on all your writing. You did it. You achieved it, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what that journey was like to go from this is my joystick to then becoming, that the LinkedIn top voice and the tech blog writer. Obviously it's number two influencer on LinkedIn, tech influencer in 2015. Like, how did you make that jump? And then what was the catalyst, or what was the point when you realized, okay, now is the time to pursue this full time, make it the career?
Wow, it's quite a long story, but I suppose when I stopped taking photos of strangers on trains and trams, I quickly realised that for 10 hours a week on my commute, that quickly compounded to, 50 hours a month? And then look at that over a year. It's 500 hours over a year. So what could I do with that time? So it was around that time I started listening to podcasts and started listening to Gary Vaynerchuk. And every day that was my soundtrack. I got this dead time. What am I going to do with it? Gary Vaynerchuk was whispering in my ear every day, build a side hustle. You can do anything with that time. You finish work at 5, you've got till 5 till 10 at night. Build a side hustle. There's the easy part. But what am I going to build it on? So then that's something that I struggled with completely. But then found myself sat in countless corporate meetings, some of them with you, James, I might add. We've got representatives, stakeholders from finance, HR, marketing, catering. I think you noticed this too, because you were very similar to myself. Noticed there's a bit of a disconnect. A department wanted technology to solve a problem. They'd look at technology first rather than the problem. And then IT would typically respond with, well, our pipeline's full for the next 12 to 18 months, or you need to think about server and SQL licensing costs. And their eyes would roll back. So my eureka moment really was online. There's so many tech websites talking about consumer tech, from The Verge to Gizmodo, Engadget, things we were reading every day in our lunch hour. But there was very little out there about people talking about technology solving real world business problems, but in a language that everyone can understand. Get rid of those acronyms, get rid of that jargon. And that is what I started doing. And I think at this same time, it's almost like the universe and the planets and the stars align. But LinkedIn launched their own blogging platform. And we could post a whole blog on there and send it to certain channels. And I did one. I think my first one was social media ninjas or something, and almost ridiculing them. Tagged it in the social media channel. I woke up next day and there was, I think, 8,000 views, 300 comments, and I thought, oh man, I'm going to be onto something here. Maybe I'll just do this around different things that I'm seeing. So I committed to 2 blogs a week, about trending tech in business, which again compounded to, I think, 100 articles over 12 months. And I was also a community of people on LinkedIn from different industries, not just technology, and we're all supporting each other. We're liking each other's content. And I've since gone to meet those people and still big friends with them now. I met 4 of them in Chicago this year. And I think you just surround yourself with people on a similar journey to you. But fast forward 12 months from there, and LinkedIn called me up and said, Neil, we want to feature as the #2 tech writer on the whole of LinkedIn. And from that point, LinkedIn lit up like a Vegas slot
How did you
machine.
react to that, Neil? Like, what was the what was that like, that moment? I can't imagine it.
Yeah, I still didn't. I still didn't really think it was such a big deal. I thought maybe it's just a bit of a they're going to feature me on a small bit, but yeah, it just blew me away. And it was. I think I walked into the office next day, and LinkedIn had emailed all of my contacts saying, "Hey, Neil, you want to congratulate him for being the #2 writer on LinkedIn," which I got a fair bit of stick for, as you can imagine. And then before you know it, CIO magazine are messaging me saying, "Neil, we want to do an article on you winning this award," and Inc. magazine said, "Do you want a tech column with us?" And it completely blew me away. And from there, I thought, you know what, I'm getting a lot of CEOs messaging me going, Neil, you're the #2 tech writer. Can you do the same but for my CEO and write for him or her? And then fast forward 12 months, one of my clients who I was ghostwriting for, I won't say what industry, but they won the #1 award
Oh
in their
no.
industry. I came absolutely nowhere. The bittersweet life of a ghostwriter. So I go, oh, maybe I'm onto something here. So I was kind of writing in my own name, doing ghostwriting. And I thought, well, if I can set up my own business doing this stuff, I don't have to leave the day job today. There's no pressure on me to just go, I'm leaving and jump into the fire. I'm going to get X amount of money into my business bank account. If I can do that, I've proved that I can make this work. And then I can make the jump. And that's kind of what forced my hand. I then reached that figure, and then I was terrified, thinking, "Oh my God, I've now got to actually do this." And I remember being terrified. But since I've done it, my only regret is I didn't do it sooner. But I think you're where you're meant to be in life at every moment. I think that's the way I look at it, anyway.
God, yeah, that's got to be scary. That the jump
Oh man,
from kind of the comfort of full-time work to completely independent.
yes. And I think when I made that jump, I think I lost 2 clients pretty quickly as well. And I'm like, oh no, what have I done? But yeah, then quickly things started ramping up and everything kind of worked out. So, but yeah, scary. The hardest thing is the tax situation. You know, you get paid in a day job, the tax man takes his money at the end of the month. But now I'm always like 8 months behind. I've got a big tax bill that's due, and I have to make sure I've not spent too much of that. I think that's the biggest challenge. But I've worked my way around that too.
Very impressive. Wow.
It's fascinating, and we talked. I remember we used to talk all the time about that kind of dream. And when I think when you told me you'd done it, you'd made the jump. I was like, wow, well done. I think I may have even done a little clap to myself wherever I was at the time, and been like, huge respect. That it is massive.
Oh,
I can't imagine you know having the balls to walk away from that kind of that security blanket. And I guess like any entrepreneur, you've got to, haven't you, at some point you've got to cut the ties,
yeah,
get rid of the safety net, and have a go. But to actually do it, and then to go on and be as successful as you've been, it's fantastic, and it's inspiring, really. And a lot of the stuff that, to be honest, that I do now with Robbie, I take inspiration from what you've done. I'm not trying to go on the journey that you've been on.
yeah,
I don't expect this to ever supplant permanent employment, but maybe one day. But I think you were one of those early content creators. You look now, everyone wants to be a YouTuber or an
yeah,
influencer. I know you hate the word. You were it. before it was it. I think that's really cool.
It's crazy,
The,
and it reminds me of the Steve Jobs quote. You know, the one where you can't join up the dots looking forward. It's not until now I look back and think, well, actually, doing Neil's deals, playing Pez, which progressed to This Is My Joystick, which gave me the bug for writing, and then the IT job. It's like everything kind of happened and compounded over those 10 years. And if you speak to any startup founders, they'll all tell you that 10-year overnight success story where stuff happens. But I think as well, I think the universe does give us that little nudge in the right direction. And I think I'm getting a bit of an aging hippie, but the whole manifest thing, and if you put time and effort into things, and things will happen for you, but you just got to put the time in, and there's no shortcut. I think that's about it, really.
It sounds like the quality of your writing over time is a big part of why everyone noticed you, I guess, with the blogging and the LinkedIn, and then being approached by various other kind of columns. How did you develop your kind of writing from the early? I know you mentioned there was a pretty critical editor that you worked with, but even
Yeah.
beyond that, how did you improve that over time for anyone who's interested in getting into blogging or writing?
Yeah, it's best is have someone that's in the industry, whether it be an editor, and if you have, you do need to develop quite thick skin quite quickly. And if you have an editor that's pulling your stuff apart, it's easy to think, oh, I'm no good at this, But just learn. I always try and learn from every conversation I have with anyone. Just take those little things from them and just try and progress. And more than anything, keep writing. I mean, as I said a few minutes ago, 2 blog posts a week is nothing, really. We've all got a few hours in the week where just write something that we're passionate about. And I would say it's easier now with ChatGPT because you can brainstorm ideas and get those ideas on paper. But just keep writing. 2 articles. Is it 50,000 hours to become an expert in something, or is it 10,000 hours? But 2 articles a week is what 100 articles a year. Compound that over several years, your writing will naturally get better. But it's like anything. You just got to keep at it
Very
and
cool.
enjoy it.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's great advice. And how did the writing then, Neil, lead to the tech talks? Because we're up to, I think you said just before we started recording, not a million miles off 3,000 episodes now.
Yeah.
How did that happen? And, how does that play into the independence that you now enjoy? Yeah, just tell me about the Tech Talks daily podcast.
Well, it all started by the LinkedIn. I was getting great engagement. So I had, I think, over 1 million views on articles, hundreds of engagements. And I think a mistake a lot of people do is they put their content out there. They don't respond to comments. People may say something with a completely different opinion on your article and think, oh, well, they're having a go at me. But I always say, no, I want to hear your opinion. I want to have a conversation with you. So my idea was to try and put a human voice to everything that I was writing about. If I'm writing about a company, let's get the CEO on there. Let's get their human voice on there. So at the time, I did convince the editors at Inc. magazine to allow me to write an article and then embed the conversation below. And I did it for a few, but editors are not keen because in magazines, you're not allowed to say, they're very fussy about including links to a company, never mind saying nice things about them. And there's good reasons for that because there's a lot of unscrupulous writers that will take bungs to write nice things about companies and get links in magazines. So they all try and avoid that. And I think it took me 50 episodes to find my format. I began just talking about the weekly tech news, but then I quickly realised that 6 months from now, those episodes are just useless. So I tried to create a content on make it evergreen, and also have regular interviews. But more than anything, learn from people. What problems are they dealing with in their workplace? How is technology solving it? And I did 3 a week. And I was booked up for a month in advance. So I thought, oh no, I've got a great idea. I'm going to go week. I'm going to go daily. And that will completely remove the queue and it was nice and steady. But now, currently, here in 2023, I think we're recording this in 24th of July. I currently have 65 interviews booked in till mid-September. So trying to keep that waiting list down didn't work. But again, I'd love to say it was part of a master plan, but it just kind of an extension of what I was already doing with the writing and just trying to further bring it to life because I think we all consume content in different ways. Some people like podcasts, some people like long form content, some people prefer just to watch a video. So it was just trying to get the voices out there, really.
Yeah, it's fascinating to watch. And I remember the early days. I remember when I can't remember who it was at work said, "Have you heard Neil's podcasting?" And I went, "No, has he really? What? How did he achieve this? What was involved in this process?" And I listened, and I do remember, yeah, your format was very much kind of talk to me, share your opinions, tell me what your thoughts are, and I'll even feature them. And you were doing the latest tech stuff, and then, as you say, you pivoted, and then it started becoming interviews. And as you say, you're just booked up constantly now, which is fantastic. And every day someone new, and I think the format works really well. And they're not. I say too long. I'm going to get myself in trouble now because Robbie gives me grief for going over the hour mark every week. But you keep them to sort of what, Neil, 20, 30 minutes? Is that normally about the sort of length you go
Yeah,
for?
I figure if I'm going out daily, I need to be the soundtrack to somebody's commute. I can't
Mhm.
entertain the Joe Rogan territory of 3 hour conversations. People will be leaving in their droves. So, and I'm also conscious people aren't going to listen to every single episode because every day is completely different. Obviously, I've spoken to you about legal tech. Tomorrow could be crypto. The day after, ed tech or property tech. It's just every day is a completely different topic. So I think the idea, or for me when I started it really, was let's look at an industry together. Let's look at how technology is improving. And if you're in that industry, let me know your thoughts on it. And that's how I try and approach it.
No, it's great. I mean, like you said, I'm not going to pretend I've listened to all 3,000 or 2,800, whatever we're up to now, but I've listened to a lot of them. And there was a while when I was regularly commuting before kind of COVID, where you were exactly that. You were kind of my morning commute, and something nice about checking in with a friend, but also always learning something new. So we'll post links to this below for anyone who wants to go and check out Neil's podcast. But you absolutely should if you haven't already.
So
Um,
sorry, just a question. Sorry, you started. So
no, no, go on, Robert, you go.
you started with the kind of 50. The first 50 episodes were just on the kind of tech review of the week, and then you
Yeah.
pivoted into that interview format. Has there from that the 51st episode onwards? What else? What has kind of evolved over time with the podcast? From the format to the technology that you're using and things like that.
Yeah, the microphones, man. I started with a snowball, and then I progressed to a Yeti, and then there's another microphone that I had for about 700 episodes that I absolutely love, beginning with H, a high end one, but just a little bit cheaper than the Shure. You'll probably know it, but I can't remember off the top of my head now. So yeah, and then now obviously I've gone on these, as we were talking at the very beginning before we started recording. I've gone with the Scarlett and the Shure microphones XLR. So the tech has evolved. My format, I think my voice, I've suddenly turned into some kind of radio DJ where, hey, how you doing? That seems to completely change the confidence between how I talk now and how I talked on episode 50. It's almost scary. It's like a different person. So, but again, it's just 2,500 interviews, and you change and become more confident and feel more comfortable doing it. But to begin with, anyone thinking of starting their own podcast, we all say, I hate the sound of my own voice. Nobody likes the sound of their own voice. We all say, do I really sound like that? Is that how you hear me? We all think that, but honestly, just go for it. Just keep showing up. Is my biggest advice to anyone thinking of starting a podcast. 99% is just showing up, being a part of someone's routine, turning up every Tuesday or whatever day of the week, and be a part of that person's routine. That's what it's all about, and building that community and serving the community. I've lost track of the amount of people that have got to episode 7 and say, Neil, how do I monetize this podcast? And I'm like, man, you need to serve your audience first and build an audience before even thinking about that stuff.
So you picked on a question I was going to ask you actually, which is, you have done, like you said, nearly 3,000 episodes now, and as far as I'm aware, correct me if I'm wrong, you don't do sponsorships, you don't do advertising on your podcast. Is that correct?
If the sponsors come in, I do. I've had a few VPN companies, as long as they're not gambling and they're a good fit for the show. So I've had a couple of VPN companies, entrepreneurials, startups. I've had a few where I will feature an ad a day, but they've got to be a good fit. And I would sooner have
Yeah.
control of that. There's a lot of deals with Spotify and LinkedIn or your podcast host that will insert ads and give you pennies. And I think, well, if I'm going to have an ad on my podcast, I know the value of it. I'm going to charge you X amount, and then we'll feature your ad. But I'm not going to put in ads
Uh,
for £12.
I like that. No, I like that approach. And the reason I ask is that when you started this podcasting journey, I mean, how many years, Neil, has the Daily Tech Talk been going now? To have
2015, I
achieved that.
started. Yeah.
Okay, so we're up to 8 years now. The podcasting landscape, I mean, the content creation landscape has changed hugely in that time, but podcasting now, every celebrity's got one.
Yeah.
But of course, a lot of them won't get into it until they've got a sponsorship, and they're sponsored from day one. And in fact, I had a really nice comment reach out to me about our podcast and said that what they liked was it felt like old school podcasting.
Yeah.
It was just two friends talking about stuff they're passionate about. There were no kind of random inserts for hair loss treatment for men or shavers or whatever it must be. And I think that
Where you got
I
that
like the
idea
fact
from
that
there, Jay?
not that particular advert stuck out to me at all in the past, as it keeps. Anyway, but yeah, I think there is, like I said, podcasting has changed so much. You've adapted your podcast as you've gone, but you've also stayed true to certain principles. Was that
Mm.
important to you? Was that a
Oh,
conscious
yeah.
thing, or was it accidental?
Yeah, I think people want authenticity. They want to feel that they can get to know you, feel like they know you. And it's so strange, really, because I've had people come up to me and they're like, "Oh, you're the podcast guy," and like you said with that your example earlier about having a fanboy listening to an interview with you, and you really connect with people. And I think it's such a missed opportunity for a podcaster with an authentic relationship with their listeners. The first thing that they want to do is put an advert for ZipRecruiter on there or something like that. And I think really you need your own business to begin with. That should be the foundations of everything, and then you use your podcast to build trust. People get to know you, and then you can go from there and include ads for your own services, the things that you do, how you can help people, not just sending them off to online bingo or something like. Just feels such a waste. So yeah, for me, it's all about connecting with the audience. How can I help you? Whether that be working with me or whether just be sharing a conversation and not selling to them. I think people just want a nice conversation. Or at least that's my old school way of looking at it.
I like that though, and I do think there's something to be said for that. And I think podcasting always used to feel like a strange thing to do to me. A lot of effort, and often done for no gain. Most people who did podcasts did it as well as the thing that made them money, and it almost felt like something that was done for audience, I guess, retention and building a community, but it wasn't monetized. Now, as you
Yeah,
said, every podcast has got constant ad reads, or or they're woven into the topics that they're talking about in a way that feels a little bit deceitful and a bit dirty. And I don't know,
yeah.
it always puts me off when I hear them. So it's nice when you've got some principled podcasts out there and people doing things for the passion and for the fun of doing it, and I think that's great.
And I also think that the amount of strange looks I've had over the years, I'll always remember going into the workplace and people had heard the podcast, and a few people would look at me immediately thinking, "Why is he doing this?" I could see the cogs turning in their head, and they're going, "So let me get this straight: you record these interviews, you put these interviews on the internet, and you don't get paid for these interviews. Why are you doing this?" This didn't understand it at all, but essentially it paved the way for me doing everything that I'm doing now, including tech conferences all over the world and interviewing people. So just keep showing up every week, I would say to anyone.
It's great advice, Neil, and we're trying to live by it. To be honest, Robbie and I have said from the start of this journey, the one thing we would always do is try and be consistent and make sure that every
Yeah.
week there was something new to listen to. Whether it's any good or not, that's kind of up to you as the listener. But we'll make sure it's there every week, regardless. Neil, you mentioned you get to travel all over the world, and you've hit upon my next question and my last one, really, in terms of deep diving you. So you can start to relax. The interrogation's nearly over. You've got to travel, and I've seen some of the fantastic places you've been to. Tell us a little bit about kind of how what you do has unlocked that, and what are some of the cooler things that you've gotten to do, or places you've gotten to go because of being the tech blog writer.
Well, a moment ago I was talking about monetizing the podcast and things, and one of the things I wanted to do was I help people write content. Okay, so I help ghostwrite content. I thought so many people were asking me, and businesses of people I was interviewing were asking, "Neil, how do you launch a podcast?" And I'm like, "Okay, I'm going to do a course, and I will teach you how to launch your own podcast. It's not rocket science." And I ended up in Denver, Colorado. The conference was no longer virtual. All those people that I was telling you about in that LinkedIn time where I was when I won that Top Voice Award, it was only possible through the support of so many other great writers from different industries. And one person, Sarah Elkin, she created her own conference called No Longer Virtual, where she got all those online connections, put them in a room. Everyone learns about each other and how they can help each other. And I did a talk about teaching people how to launch a podcast and talk about the course that I was planning, etc. And straight afterwards, everyone was like, "I want to launch a podcast, but Neil, I don't want you to teach me how to do it. I want you to do it for me." And that moment there just paved the way for another service, which I'm not just the writer guy. I help businesses launch our own podcast. So yes, you can record a conversation on Discord, Zoom, or Teams, but I'll be the guy that makes sure it's edited and it all goes on iTunes and or Apple Podcasts now, Spotify, etc. So that everything I've done led to that, and the podcast also led to many international tech conferences. And I mentioned Gary Vaynerchuk earlier, Robbie, and my story came full circle from listening to the Gary Vaynerchuk telling me to build that side hustle to interviewing him backstage in Vegas. And then 6 months later, I was at another tech conference in Armenia and I interviewed him in front of 100 fans, which was one of the most bizarre experiences ever. And I kind of promised him I wasn't stalking him, even though I bought him an Ultimate Warrior wrestling figure because he's a big wrestling figure guy. So I bought him a gift. So look, I'm not stalking you, but let's do this again.
But I know your deepest loves, and I bought you a collectible that I know you'll cherish because you haven't got it in your collection.
Yeah. Oh no, it wasn't
But I'm
Ultimate
not
Warrior.
stalking you.
It was British Bulldog. I got him. That was it. I thought, I need to make myself memorable here, But
And you said, was that the same? Wasn't it? Was it Estonia? I think you were in recently, or was that the Armenia conference? And I've got my countries mixed
so
up. You were at one
Estonia was
very recently, which looked fascinating. Tell us about that.
Man, Estonia was fantastic, out of this world. I didn't know too much about the place other than Mark Poom, the goalkeeper for Derby County back in the day, but 99% of their government services are all online now. So registering a birth, a death, or filing taxes all takes minutes online, and it's just a tech society. Everyone's got a digital ID. Everything is done online. And what also got me was when you're walking in the streets, there's little food delivery bots. So these robots are going around, driving around the streets, delivering your food. You put in the code from your phone, unlocks, and you get your food out. There was literally dozens of these things just going around the road, and nobody bats an eyelid. Nobody at all. Everyone's just kind of, yeah, it's kind of what happens. I said to a guy, I said, did people interfere with these? Because here in the UK, I suspect they would be mischievously put upside down at best, or graffitied, or stolen and melted for scrap. He goes, no. When it's snowing in the winter, we pick them up and help them and put them on a clear part of the road. And it was a tech utopia. It was just an amazing trip, and got a very soft spot in my heart for Estonia now.
That's incredible.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah. And I think obviously people want to slap me when I say this, but it feels like every tech conference though is in Vegas, and a 10-hour flight for a 3-day conference is not as glamorous as you might think. But I think South by Southwest remains top of my conferences bucket list. I think it just looks out of this world. I think it's in Austin, Texas. But that's the one that I really want to go to. But I've been very lucky to get to all these different places and ultimately just sit down, talk about something that I love, and feel quite blessed.
That's amazing. It's fantastic. I'm conscious of time, Neil, because we don't want to keep you longer than is fair. I've got a couple of questions I wanted to wrap up with, but I also wanted to give Robbie a chance to ping a couple of questions your way if you've got anything you wanted to ask, Robbie.
Nothing in particular. I think I've asked a few throughout. I'm just in awe at your origin story and your success so far. I'll definitely be following you a bit more closely now after this. It's just been really a great pleasure to speak to you about this stuff, and hugely inspiring for what Jay and I are trying to do with the podcast, and hopefully everyone who's listening as well is inspired to do their own writing and podcasting themselves as well.
Yeah, right back at you, Robin. I love what you guys are doing here. So again, quality and consistency, turning up same time every week. Don't get sidetracked. Keep doing what you're doing. Build that audience, and it just snowballs bit by bit by bit by bit. And over the years, you've got an audience that's an engaged audience as well. And that's the most important thing.
Definitely. Thanks, Neil. Well, we've got a couple of questions to wrap us up. So, Neil, kind of reflecting now, we've talked a lot about the past. Let's talk about the future. I'm interested. You are a man who knows about lots of different tech sectors and talks to CIOs and CEOs and founders and entrepreneurs all the time. What's got you excited that's coming up in the future? It could be tech, it could be gaming. What's getting your juices flowing?
Oh, I think if we stick with the travel theme, I love how technology is transforming travel, but I think AI, Gen AI, that's all we're all talking about, let's be honest. So a lot of people are saying it's almost like the iPhone moment, but I would argue it's the App Store moment because I went to Montenegro a couple of weeks ago, as I think I told you, and I asked ChatGPT to create me an itinerary, and it recommended things like accommodation, restaurants, wine tasting experiences, a boat trip, etc. And the only thing missing from that was a link saying, hey, if you want to do all this stuff, just go to booking.com now, hit checkout, and it's all done. And what excites me? App integration with Gen AI, because I think that is what's coming next. But with a bit of caution, with my IT head on, of course, it's how long until ChatGPT says we don't need a middleman like Booking.com. We can do it all in one app. So excitement, a little bit of caution, but I think there's just great things ahead for me.
Brilliant. Neil, we're going to finish with a quick fire round. No pressure. You won't be held to account on any of these answers that you give. And then we're going to encourage you to kind of let everybody who listens to us know where they can find you. Before we do that, then, are you ready for some quick fire questions?
Go for it, man. Let's hear it.
Okay. Warm up question. I think we know where we're going to go with this. Apple or Android?
I'm an Apple guy.
I won't hold
fair
that.
enough.
Too much against you.
He
In
liked
my
so
defense,
much about the episode.
in my defense, I have been an Android guy in the past. I've tried to embrace Android. I've successfully done it for several years, but it's a bit like that scene in The Godfather 3 where Al Pacino says, "Just when I'm out, they pull me back in." So I always end up back.
Very good.
Okay, next question for you, Neil. Light mode or dark mode?
Ooh, that is a good one. I think I'm more and more embracing dark mode. Yeah, definitely.
I feel like I live in the dark when it comes to apps. If it offers
Yeah,
dark mode, it's toggled on immediately.
yeah.
Console gaming or PC gaming?
Ah. There's a side of me that wants to be incredibly cool and be part of the PC master race, but I'm a
Yeah.
console gamer.
And I guess then keeping in that sort of theme, where do you sit within your console space? Are you Mario or you Sonic?
Neither. I'm gonna be controversial here. I've never
Ooh.
understood the Nintendo thing, the cartoon characters. Just don't get it at all. I like to be shooting and blowing stuff up. I like the PG rated stuff.
So what's your franchise then, Neil? Where do you go? I need to ask the question now. If you're not Mario, you're not Sonic. What are you? Where do you
Oh,
go?
I'm a guy on default settings. You know, I like a bit of FIFA. I like a bit of Call of Duty, a bit of Battlefield, a bit of Grand Theft Auto, Red Dead Redemption, all the big hitters. Really, that's where I like to just
Fair
kick
enough.
back and get up to
Nothing wrong
mischief.
with that. Nothing wrong with that. Me and Robbie were only texting this week talking about the Xbox servers being fixed for the old COD games and just reminiscing about where COD peaked as far as we were concerned. And for me, Modern Warfare 2,
Yeah,
fond memories of playing that with you, Neil.
Game.
In
yeah,
fact, and of many others. Those servers my matchmaking friend list would be full every night with that game. Loved it.
yeah.
Fantastic times. Last question for you, Neil. This is maybe a bit future facing. Are you augmented reality or are you virtual reality?
Wow, yeah, I do have a bit of an issue with the virtual reality. I think immersive experiences are great, but do I want to be sat in a room with a headset like Ready Player One? I'm not. I've got I'm conscious here. I've got a Quest, haven't I? I've got it. I've bought into it. I want to love it, but I think for me the exciting part is how do we remove these barriers from online and the physical world? How do we do that? And I think it's a mixture of the two. So I'm trying to go around the houses here, waffling on, but I'm going to go augmented.
Fair enough. No, great answer. I think it's a really interesting one, isn't it? I think Apple have definitely put the cat amongst the pigeons when it comes to virtual reality, and now everyone's thinking spatial computing and
Yeah,
augmented.
yeah.
We'll see where that will go in the next couple of years. Exciting times if you're into that space. Neil, it's been absolutely brilliant having you on. I've loved catching up and learning some stuff that I didn't already know and getting to share your backstory with our listeners and with Robbie, who I think has probably found it as interesting as anyone. Can I ask you to just plug anything and everything you do, where can we find you? And of course, we'll share any and all links that you'd like us to share in the show description. But where can everyone find you?
Sure thing. Well, first of all, the pleasure is mine. I'm a big fan of you guys and what you're doing, so keep on with that. But as for me, Tech Talks Daily is wherever you normally listen to your podcasts. My website, techblogwriter.co.uk, if you want to work with me. For socials, just look for @NeilC.Hughes on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Threads, or wherever it is you hang out. It's the same name across everything.
Brilliant. Yeah, I've got Threads, Neil. I'll be honest, I haven't opened it since I installed it, but once Twitter finally dies, I'll convert.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, Neil, for joining us. And again, that's all for this episode. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube and on all good podcast services so you don't miss an episode. You can also check us out on gaming streams. Again, that's YouTube @Jay and Robbie, where we stream most Sunday nights and play a variety of games. We'll see you next time.